Good afternoon. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. I'm Miles. Hope you've been doing well, staying safe, and just doing all the things. You know the drill. If you're new here, hi, I'm Miles. Hope you're doing well also. I do music stuff, as the title of the channel would imply. And today we're going to be talking about songwriting. One of the things that gets brought to my attention more often than not in my line of work as a teacher is the challenge of finding inspiration when it comes to songwriting. I'll have students come in and they say, I want to write some new stuff, but I sit down to write and I just don't know what to play. I don't know how to start. I have some ideas, but I don't know how to progress forward with them to keep them from sounding like they're bland or like there's something that I've already done before. Which, totally relatable. It happens to me more often than not. There's a reason why I jokingly have a sign that says my songs with an arrow pointing down to the trash bag that I have down here. Because I tend to be more critical about my creative endeavors than I need to be. But we'll get into that. So today I want to talk about some of the ways that I go about my own approach to working on new ideas in terms of songwriting, or just in general in terms of spicing up already existing ideas. But before we dive in, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. It just makes these videos a little bit more visible to other people that might not be subscribed to the channel yet. And yeah, just trying to grow this channel, trying to get the word out to more people. So help me out. It's only going to benefit everyone. I mean, it's going to help me, but like it's helping everyone. Trust me. So I try to break this down into an easy to follow, simple process. But one of the things I'm going to utilize in this whole thing is one of my own songs. And the song that I'm going to be using today is one of the latest singles from my band, Our Fears, the song Misleader. I'll leave a link for all that stuff down below in the description for you to check out if you feel so inclined. So step one, you want to pick out a chord progression. It doesn't have to necessarily be based off of any sort of like music theory based concept. It can really just be based off of what sounds good to your ear. When I was in college and I was studying music, I found early on, once I started getting all these different concepts under my belt and understood, that they started to become almost hurdles in my way when it came to being creative and writing my own music, because I was thinking more about the theoretical aspect of things than I was just creating. So rather than focus solely on whether or not a chord is complementary to the chord that came before it, maybe just write stuff that sounds good to you and then worry about the theoretical aspect of it later. It'll certainly come up because you're going to go back and you're going to refine everything anyway. So for now, just treat step one as the opportunity to just get some ideas mapped out. And if you're like me and you have the memory of a goldfish, it might not be such a bad idea to write this stuff down or just have a recorder of some sort handy while you're working on putting together a chord progression. It'll come in handy if you forget this stuff later on. As far as the chords that I utilized for this song, we started with A minor. Now from A minor, I went to E, and then after that I went to D minor, and then to B, and then back to E. So as far as the music theory aspect of the chord progression, it would be mapped out as a 1-5-4-2-5 chord progression. It should also be noted that my guitar that I'm using on this song is actually tuned to C sharp standard, so A minor in this case is going to sound like F sharp minor. So just keep that in mind. Now for step two, spice it up. In this case, what we're going to be doing to add some spice to our already established chord progression is to see if there's any way that we could take the chords that we have and we can alter some of the intervals within them to give some different characteristics and perhaps a different melodic direction to the overall chord progression. In this case, the first thing I did was I took our E chord and I have it switching halfway through its regular duration from E to E dominant 7. This serves just to give a different sort of characteristic within the same chord structure that we started with, and to give some direction heading towards the third chord in the progression. Additionally, with the B chord in the chord progression, I switched that from just being B to now being B minor 7. This just changes the characteristic of the chord overall, and I think it fits a little bit better with the chord progression. But even still, it felt like the chord itself wasn't suiting the entire chord progression in a proper manner. So rather than staying with just B minor 7, I opted to change out B minor 7 for B half diminished, otherwise known as B minor 7 flat 5. The flat 5th in the chord just gives a different characteristic, a bit of a lean, heading back towards E again. I also decided to do this song in 3/4 rather than in my typical time signature of choice, 4/4, just to try to step outside of my comfort zone a little bit and encourage some different ideas to come about. Step 3, break up your chords. Basically, the idea here is to figure out if there's any sort of single note phrases that can come from the structure of the chords that you picked out for your progression. If you already have an idea of the key signature that you're playing within, then you already know what notes you have at your disposal to utilize. But if you don't know what key signature you're playing, and that's okay too, you can take the chords that you already have established for your chord progression and simply start off by arpeggiating those chords. Play each of the notes in the chords one note at a time, and see if you can figure out a rhythmic, melodic phrase that could come from each of those chords that can make one giant melodic statement. As far as the chords that I'm using here, the way that I approached it was to try to figure out like a 3-note pattern that I could use that's basically outlining all of the important bits of those chords that are within the chord progression, and using those 3-note patterns to make up a full sort of single note phrase that represents all those chords, rather than just strumming through them. This isn't necessarily a unique or different way to go about putting together a chord progression in a more interesting manner. In fact, some prime examples of this same sort of approach I'd say will be Marigold from Periphery, or even the song Pattern from the Human Abstract. So what we're going to try to do right now is take the chords that we already have established and break it up into single note patterns. In this case, for A minor, one good way to figure out what notes go in A minor is to kind of break it apart in terms of the individual notes in the chord. That's just simply the octave of our low E string. So we got the root, 5th, and minor 3rd. Now if we take the 5th, take the 3rd, and move it down here, and then go here, we got 3 notes that make up our chord. And to make it an even sort of pattern, we're taking our 5th and doubling it with the open low E string. You could do the same thing for the other chords as well. So for E, it's just a matter of finding the intervals that go into the chord and just figuring out where you can play it so that you have single notes that are playable in a pattern. And the same thing for D minor. So in this case, I decided to kind of deviate from the traditional format of the chord and kind of switch around the order of the intervals so that we have a different pattern. So octaves of the note, 1st fret of low E, and the other intervals being spread out otherwise. And just to switch it up a little bit, take that same sort of idea and basically flip it upside down, going from the 2nd fret on G. So now it sounds like more information is being added, but really it's just octaves of the same stuff. And as for the B half diminished chord, we're just going through and stacking minor 3rd. So this is how you would build stack of diminished notes in general, but in this case we're just using those first 4 to make our pattern. So what we have at this point sounds pretty good. It's interesting. It's a far cry from where we were with the open chords that we initially started off with. But let's say we want to go a step further. That leads us to step 4, rephrase. In this case, we're rephrasing the single notes that make up our chord progression, either by changing the order of the single notes as they appear in the chord progression, or changing the rhythm that they're being played at. You can even add actual chords within the same area of space as these single notes and do it in combination to get another variation of the same thing without adding too much new information to what you have. So if you have a initial first verse that's all single notes, you can keep it that way, and then have the second verse slightly varied, but not so far away from where you initially started that it sounds completely different. In this case, I kind of did a little bit of both. I took the first half of the verse and did it in a way where it's almost a calm response, where I'm playing sort of power chords and then following them up with a series of single notes and vice versa, just kind of varying it up so that it sounds different, but it's still going over the same chord progression. And then in the second half, basically taking the same pattern that I started off the first verse with and just starting it with a new starting note. The cool thing about this approach is that you're not necessarily adding any new information to your chord progression, to the notes you already have established in what you have going on in your patterns. You're just simply playing them in a different way. Some prime examples of this sort of approach would be songs like Obfuscation from Between the Buried and Me, where the guitars are continuing to play the same pattern while the drums switch up where the phrasing of that pattern exists. This same approach can be heard in the Dream Theater song Sacrifice Sons. This approach also gives the drummer something else to do, and we all know how hard it is to keep the attention of a drummer. So this is definitely a good thing. So basically what I did for the first half of the second verse was take what would be our notes that make up our power chord, and I'm just playing them up higher on the A and D strings, and then going down to where you would normally play an A power chord, stemming from the A string. And then I'm following it up with, which is basically just following the notes that would be in an A minor scale, skipping over what would be your fifth, because that's where we're going in terms of the next chord in the progression. Shell chord for E7, then descending down just chromatically to what would be our D minor. So switching from the power chord with the root in the fifth to root in the third, and then again another single note pattern, and then for B half diminished, adding in this sort of descend down a half step, and then the flat fifth. Then some single notes leading into the next part of the second verse, which is basically just outlining the notes that make up E major. And now, with this second half of the second verse, I'm taking the same pattern that we initially started off with, and rather than just playing it over again the same way, I'm starting from the open low E string. Same thing for E. And then when we get to D minor, and then for the half diminished chord, just starting from the 7th fret rather than starting from the 4th fret. And then when we go back to E, ending on the 6th fret of D, which is just the major third of our E chord. So it's no new information. We already had that note right here. So while this may not be the end-all be-all approach to constructing a chord progression for a new song, it certainly offers the opportunity to take a chord progression, deconstruct it, and perhaps look at it from a different perspective that might be more enticing than what you initially had. Alright guys, well that's all I got for today as far as this topic is concerned. If you'd like to see more videos like this, let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, and you haven't already, hit the like button. And while you're down there, why don't you hit that subscribe button as well? And if you like what I'm doing here and you want to support the channel further than just liking and subscribing, you can check out the link that I have below for my Patreon page as well. Over there you'll find the materials that I utilized in the making of this video, as well as worksheets and other perks that I have available from previous videos. So go on over there and check it out. But I'll leave you with that for now. I thank you guys for your time. Hopefully you found this to be informative and useful in your own creative endeavors. Keep playing. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.